Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar, Key Metrics for Data-Driven Candidate Experience. Today, we are joined by an incredible group of leaders. We've got Kevin Grossman, Bill Cleary, and Ian Alexander. Cannot wait to dive into this content. But before we do, please notice the chat feature located at the right-hand side of your screen. This is a great place to engage with other panelists or attendees, speakers, and the content. But if you have any specific questions for the panel today, please use the Q&A tab so that we can find them quickly. We've also got the slides available for download at the top. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will get a recording within 24 hours of the end of this broadcast. A lot of times we get them out the same day, so you might even get that today if you're lucky. Today's webinar has been made possible by our good friends over at Surveil, and I'd like to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
Surveil is a complete employer satisfaction platform that makes it easy to analyze engagement and satisfaction for every phase of the talent lifecycle. Surveil's candidate feedback makes it easy to optimize your recruiting efforts, from how effective your career site is to how well hiring managers perform during interviews. Just set up Surveil and you'll get automatic feedback from pre-applicant candidates on your career site. Surveil's pre-built integrations with top applicant tracking systems let you continue gathering feedback throughout the recruiting lifecycle. As your recruiters move candidates through hiring stages, you'll trigger automatic feedback collection from candidates, hiring managers, and anyone else associated with the hiring process. You'll know exactly what's working and what's not with your recruiting efforts. And it all happens in real time. Just use Surveil's intuitive drill-down filtering to pinpoint the data so you know about potential problems as they happen. That's powerful data for optimizing and aligning your entire recruiting process. Call or email us today for a full demonstration of how Surveil can transform your organization by listening and engaging both candidates and employees. Surveil, your candidate satisfaction platform.
And we're back. Kevin, thank you so much for agreeing to moderate today's panel. I'm going to hand things over to you. I will be watching from the sidelines. If you need anything at all, just holler. Take it away.
Webinar. It's always fun to see what.
Ian, can you hear him? Josh, are you there?
I am here. I'm waiting for the call-in number to provide to Kevin. Let's start with some introductions, though. I'll start with you, Ian. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, unfortunately, Kevin's having some bandwidth issues that just popped up right before we came on. But my name's Ian Alexander. I am co-founder of Surveil. I also serve as Chief Marketing Officer, as well as many other things. And I have been in the HR technology space for well over 10 years, and I'm not even going to tell you how many years. Over 10 years I've been in this space, forever. And I'm looking forward to talking today about metrics, etc. And yeah, Bill.
Excellent. Thanks, Ian. So hi, everyone. My name is Bill Cleary. I live just outside of Philadelphia. I am the founder and managing partner of Clear Voyage Consulting, which is a new firm that I just started a few months ago. I have the opportunity to work very closely with Ian and the rest of the Surveil team as well. And I'm excited to be part of this conversation as we get the opportunity to talk about candidate experience and the different things we're seeing in the market. And so maybe I'll pass it to Kevin. We'll try and see how your connection is.
Yeah, hopefully I'm back now. I'm going to blame all the heat domes we've been experiencing. That's what I'm going to blame, even though I live by the ocean. So there you go. Hopefully I'm good for right now, everybody. Thanks so much. Kevin Grossman, Vice President of Research at ERE Media. I've been running the Candidate Experience Benchmark Research Program for over 9 years. We've been doing that research for over 13. And at the end of last year, we merged with ERE Media, and glad to be a part of that team now. So that is what I focus on. And that's what a lot of what we're going to talk about today, right, Bill and Ian?
Yep.
Good. So why don't we cue up the slides. Excellent. There we are again. Thank you, gentlemen, for introducing yourselves. So what we want to talk about, there's going to be a lot of metrics discussions around candidate experience, and especially specific to role in your organization, from recruiters all the way up to the C-suite and your business executives at the end of the day, and everybody in between. But first, what we want to do is to set the stage, is to talk a little bit about the value of measuring your candidate experience, why you should be doing that at the end of the day. And the benefits are really, they can be quite dramatic for your business and your brand at the end of the day. These include improved quality of hire. And anybody who's that's on today and measuring your candidate experience on any level, whether it's continuous feedback, our benchmark research program, both, or maybe you've been thinking about doing it, improved quality of hire is definitely one benefit, that you're going to get faster time to hire at the end of the day. Better understanding, of course, of what your strengths and weaknesses are across your recruiting candidate journey based on the candidate feedback can definitely help inform you to make those improvements. Higher acceptance rate overall from those individuals you're going to end up, that you do want to grow and sustain your business, that you're making offers to. Better potential referral rates and brand affinity, which is really universal for all companies, whether you're B2B or B2C. Referrals, you all depend on referrals at the end of the day. And by the way, in our benchmark research every year, we know that even the individuals who did not get an offer at the end of the day, there's still up to a quarter or a third of those candidates in our research are still willing to refer. And that's something very important to know, that we don't think about that from rejected candidates. But if they had a positive and fair experience, they're willing to do it. And also for B2C companies, it could impact your revenue as well, because those candidates could potentially also be your customers and vice versa. So especially for B2C companies. And that's why it's really important, by measuring continuously, actually, your candidate experience and understanding what that data is telling you, and then acting on that data, which you're going to learn a lot about in this call, about what you should be looking for and how you can then inform those actionable activities that are going to help improve your recruiting and hiring, and ultimately the final outcomes that you're all looking for, which are those individuals that you want to grow and sustain your businesses, those hires. But everybody else, it's about being positive and fair, and we're going to talk a lot about how those metrics can help you understand that.
Yeah, and from that, with all the benefits that we have, we really turn to the meat of what we're going to talk about, which is, how do you operationalize great candidate experience throughout your hiring process? It's one thing to kind of measure candidate experience occasionally, and then kind of gain some insights into how your candidate experience is doing. But really want to get to, like, how do we take that data and put it where it's needed most, so that great candidate experiences become something that you can deliver through your people, through your processes, and through your technologies, and you can do that at scale. It's even very important for larger organizations, but smaller organizations as well. How do you energize everybody and organize them around great candidate experience? So we're going to do that today by focusing on roles and cascading candidate feedback data throughout the organization. I'm kind of curious, we talk about gathering candidate feedback, and some people do it continuously, some people do it occasionally, some people do it annually with the Candy program, et cetera. I just wanted to throw up a poll and find out how people in the audience here how often you're measuring candidate experience. And as I say that, a lot of what we're going to present to you, has to do with really gathering feedback on a pretty high level, continuously, very frequently. tying feedback back to operational data within your organization, which is a level of capability that is something to aspire to. But no matter what level you're gathering feedback, the key is really to do it as often as you can and to surface it as much as you can in those day-to-day, week-in, week-out operations. So we'll leave this up here a bit. I guess I'll put my answer in because that's what I'm seeing. And all right, we're seeing some results. I'll close the poll here if everybody's answered. Well, I'm seeing some more answers coming in. I think there's a little bit of a delay here too, but yeah, I think we've all had a chance. So close that out. So interesting information. Let me just open that up again, see if I can see that. All right. Well, I blew past that. Apologies, everybody. Kev?
Yeah, Ian, you want me to? I have it up right now. Did you want me to?
Okay. I can't see it, unfortunately.
Okay, share some of the results. So
yeah,
it looks like the majority of people, almost 40%, said after hire, which is usually what I'm sure you found this over the years too, and as we have, that's where a lot of the comfort level is surveying new hires. So almost 40% said after the hire. And then the next highest one was, well, is other. What, I don't know what other would mean with all the other choices. And then you had just a smattering of just smaller chunks of folks at key hiring stages after interview. We're both at 11%, 10% is quarterly. And then you have monthly and once a year that are at 4%. So the majority of folks, which I'm not surprised, is after the hire. So the new hire survey.
Right. And pros and cons on that. The knock on that is that can often skew your feedback data.
There is a halo effect to the data.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But the thing is, you're gathering feedback. That's important. As frequently as you can is important. And it just shows a level of capability. There's levels to this thing, like there are levels to everything. And we actually have a white paper that is related to this data or this information that we're presenting today called the candidate experience, the data-driven candidate experience maturity model, which kind of shows the levels, where organizations are, what benefits they can get by increasing their capability. But these metrics that we're going to be showing you today are fairly granular and fairly continuous. So something to aspire to. But the meat of this thing is, how do we cascade whatever metrics we have throughout the organization? What benefits can we get? So by role, I just want to kind of touch base on the roles here. In talent acquisition, when I talk about a recruiter, I'm in general talking about an individual contributor, somebody who has some level of responsibility for sourcing, screening, interfacing with hiring managers, shepherding candidates through from application to disposition. Just generalized roles here. When I talk about a talent acquisition manager, I'm talking about someone, they might have some individual contributor recruiting responsibilities, but in general, I'm talking about somebody who is managing a team of recruiters. When I talk about TA director, think about a larger organization, more complex organization. That's a director who might have responsibility over a specific division within talent acquisition, whether that's a global unit, whether that is a business unit or a job family, et cetera. However your divisions are kind of broken up. In small organizations, director might be your head of TA. We're going to talk a little bit about TA director level and what their metrics are used for a little bit later on, but there is this role of talent acquisition operational manager or analyst. And oftentimes they work together or at the direction of one another to do the analysis level and the deeper digging and the searching for actionable items that you can action on. When I talk about business level, I'm really talking about hiring managers, and that's somebody who is going to conduct interviews either by themselves or in a group, and they're going to have some level of decision making in the hiring process, whether that's all or whether that's significant. And in most cases, or in many cases, they might be managing that employee as well. Talk about executive. We'll think about TA reporting into HR, and your SVP or CHRO of HR oversees all people operations and people facing programs. So they would have responsibility for a TA, and then everybody knows what a CEO is.
We do.
Nope. Are you still hearing him?
In terms of,
Oh, there we go.
so yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the role of the recruiter here. What kind of things are going on? What kind of pressures are recruiters seeing out there?
Yep.
So go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, no. So I think and sorry, Ian, I think we lost you for a second there, but I think we got you back there at the end. So, I think the key question here is, right, there's a number of different pieces on this screen here, Kevin, that talk about the disruption that's happening to the role of the recruiter. We recognize that it's changing every day. There's new expectations of, where does the recruiter job stop and start, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be curious from your opinion, obviously, leading the candies and doing the other things you do in the market, which piece sticks out to you the most? What would you say is the most kind of disruptive piece for the recruiter today?
Well, I think ultimately that's one thing that's actually not listed on here that I think kind of frames a lot of where we're at today is that it's been rough in recruiting as a profession. I think it's one of the things that we should talk about. I think many of you that are on might have been experiencing that yourselves or have peers or colleagues that are in the market now. It's been rough, and a lot of companies have downsized their recruiting teams, and the whole cliche of doing more with less is more true than it's probably ever been. But I think also, based on some of the items that we're putting out here, recruiters are definitely looked to as advisors in the organization, especially for those that really, I think, get it and are not only measuring their candidate experience, but also there's a focus on retention in TA as well. I mean, recruiters are the front line for potential new hires, which ultimately those are the final outcomes, right? The focus of all organizations and all recruiting organizations is to recruit and hire. In fact, I heard somebody recently, Bill, comment that it should not be, we shouldn't call everybody like the director of recruiting, which I know we're not on that level now. It should be the director of hiring, because ultimately all of the responsibility is those are the final outcomes, but they touch so many different people at the end of the day. And I think the ultimate outcomes for recruiters beyond the hiring itself is that candidate experience that they're responsible for delivering. We'll get to the hiring managers later, but they're really at the same time, getting feedback from the candidates. They should be asking their candidates for feedback. They should be giving feedback to the candidates as well as the hiring managers that we'll talk about later. But all of these things are important today, especially again for leaner teams with higher application volumes, for any of you that have any hiring of scale that are out there today. And that's really important to know, but you are a pivotal part of the organization, even though it's a yo-yo and has been a yo-yo for many of you, especially since the pandemic, coming out of that. But that's really ultimately what is your ultimate focus is on getting those hires to the finish line. But it's also about, again, how you are treating the candidates throughout the entire process that impacts your business and your brand.
Yeah, no, Kevin, I love that answer. I mean, the only piece I would add here,
sure,
maybe is around the first line, right? Around being an advisor. I think we can't get away with any conversation these days without talking about AI, right? And so maybe one of the things that we're also thinking about in the world of AI is how can we leverage that to give us more time as recruiters to build those deep relationships with our candidates. I think traditionally recruiters have been very good at that.
Yeah.
We can now carve out some more time to continue to build the relationship with our candidates, prepare them, prepare our hiring teams, our hiring managers, our interview teams, really get to know our candidates. I think, the feedback will then, be seen in the responses in the surveys that your candidates are then completing on your behalf when they're talking about what they experienced, and then we have an opportunity to champion you in the market. And I think that's pretty exciting.
It is, Bill, every year in the Candy benchmark data, I'm sure in the Surveil data too, for their customers, that we see comments, besides all the negative comments that you're always going to get with candidates who aren't getting hired or aren't moving on, but comments like, I'm bummed I didn't go any farther, but John, the recruiter, treated me fairly. John or Sally, the recruiter, was really good about shepherding me through the steps. Those are the things you want to see, and you want that feedback, and you want to be able to understand and see that feedback on a regular basis too.
Yep.
Yep.
And the
Can't
candidate's
manage-
still a customer.
Yep. And you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So
That's right.
being able to measure those experiences and as frequently as possible, as Bill, a great point, Bill, you're going to, the things that you do to free up the recruiter to be more of service to candidates is going to improve that candidate experience. You should see that in the feedback data. So let's talk about metrics. When we talk about recruiter metrics, the idea here is to provide recruiters with simple, basic, high-level metrics in terms of their main constituencies, which is one of their constituencies is candidates and one is hiring managers. So just a quick overview of what is your candidate NPS score, which is a portable and benchmarkable measure of satisfaction. You want to show them what's the trends, what's that satisfaction look like over time. By the same token, you should be gathering feedback from hiring managers at the close of a rec. Find out what's working within the relationship between the hiring manager and the recruiter, and get a satisfaction metric for that, and be able to see what's the trend lines on satisfaction there. Perfect example, if you've got initiatives in your organization where your recruiters are going to be in a more advisory capacity, you want them to behave in that way. Well, you should see that come through in your metrics over time in terms of satisfaction if you're doing it the right way. We recommend for all metrics that you surface throughout your organizations, you always include the latest comments coming from candidates. It's a good way to connect people to how those experiences are being implemented and how they're being received by candidates in a very anecdotal way. But it's a great way to see, as Bill, you said, kudos are coming in for our clients much more than negative experiences. So it's a great way to catch little details that might spark you to kind of dig in a little bit more and explore. All right, I keep hitting my space bar to advance. Go ahead, Bill. Kevin.
Nope, you're going to touch on it next, so I'll be quiet. Okay. Go ahead.
So the benefits for surfacing those metrics to recruiters is you make recruiters accountable for candidate satisfaction day in, day out. I think most recruiters know that they're accountable for candidate satisfaction, but giving them those metrics, helping them understand the effects of the experiences they deliver on candidates, really gets their head in the game. And look, I know recruiters are very empathetic people, but oftentimes, if you're in a high volume situation, or even all the applicants that sort of pass through the system that you never interface with, it can kind of become toggle switches on a disposition, screen. And this just is a great way for recruiters to kind of maintain that empathy. Like candidates have experiences, they have desires, they have hopes, etc. It's a great way to keep them plugged in there. And just to be clear, the most common practice here is most organizations we work with, they want managers to manage and recruiters to recruit. So they don't typically surface all the recruiter feedback data to recruiters. They're typically going to have managers monitor that data and really look for anomalies, whether that's a great experience that they can highlight in front of the team, et cetera, or whether that is something that they need to speak with the recruiter about and learn more about.
Hey, Ian, just one more quick note about being held accountable. I can tell you that the highest rated companies in our Candy benchmark research, the majority of them are tying candidate experience performance to their recruiters. Yes.
Yep. And down the line, we don't work with a client that really isn't using the data for performance management.
Yep.
So how do you get those metrics? Here's some best practice questions. I'm not going to go through all the questions, but the slides are available in the handout tab to your right. Please feel free to download the slides, and you can have this as a reference. It's designed for that. So let's talk about TA managers.
Excellent. So here we wanted to talk just a little bit about this for a second. So one of the things that we recognize is that managers have feedback right at their fingertips, right? And so, what does it mean for a manager, as a TA manager, when you're looking at some of this data, right, and some of this information? So, Kevin, you just hit on a great point, right? Leading organizations are using performance data, using this data in performance conversations.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that, right? What are you seeing as far as how they're using that data, and what are those conversations looking like?
Well, I mean, they want to make sure, obviously, that they are again holding their recruiting team accountable to the delivery, and it's tough too when I still hear, which is still so surprising to me when I hear that in certain industries, in certain job types, that recruiters are maybe carrying 50, 60, 70, 80 plus recs. I mean, that's insane. You can't even breathe in between that, much less do quality communications. But the point is that you want to be able to manage and understand that data and understand the strengths and weaknesses of the recruiting team across the candidate journey as it relates to your candidate experience too. Because a lot of you that answered the first poll question said that your comfort level is in surveying those new hires, and that's great. That's some data that you can get, but that's also, there's a halo effect there for those that get the hire. What's going on in the rest of the candidate journey, especially from the point of application to those who get screened and interviewed, to those who get potentially a final offer made, and to those who are the candidates who are accepting those offers, and the candidates that are also declining the offers, and the candidates that are withdrawing. That's all data and information that the recruiters do impact, and the TA leaders, the TA managers, need to understand that and understand where they need to triage and double down on with what's working at the end of the day.
And completely agree. And I would, the only piece I would add to that is, and then be able to look at it across business units and across geographies and compare teams, right? And I think it's a great way to kind of dig into the data and really see what's going on.
Do you know what? Real quick, Bill, just only because I just wrote about this and it came out today. And this is, I don't want to get too tangential, but when the difference between a centralized recruiting structure and decentralized, right? Because you know this, that companies flip every few years. It seems like they go back and forth depending on what business issues they're trying to solve, what changes in the business. But in our data, what's interesting is that when it's a structured, consistent, centralized recruiting structure, there is a more of a positive candidate experience return that we find. So anyway, totally aside, let's move on.
Yours.
Okay, it's a great segue. Okay, so as a TA manager, what kind of metrics are we looking for? Now we're starting to focus on how the team is performing, exactly like what you guys were saying. When we're looking at the candidate satisfaction, we're looking at what's the satisfaction for my team. Is that where I want it to be? Is it a good number that I can take pride in, or is it a number I want to boost up? Beyond that, you want to be able to see each one of the members of your team, what their satisfaction metrics are, and you want to see that over time so that you can look for anomalies, look for areas where you're overperforming, look for areas where you're underperforming. And again, with all these metrics that I'm talking to you about, and we talk about candidate satisfaction, and I love to see satisfied candidates. Mm-hmm. The value of candidate feedback data is the data that underlies these KPIs that we're showing you today. Right. These are the jumping off points. These are the signposts that are pointing you to areas where you're really doing well and areas where you're not. And the idea is you drill into those areas and you see specifically what's going on from a rating standpoint, and then you see all the candidate comments that are associated with that ratings. So your operational data, things like what's your time to hire, what's your cost per hire, they tell you what's happening. Your candidate feedback data tells you why it's happening, when it's happening, and how to fix it. So keep that in mind as I show you all these metrics. These are high-level KPIs that we're managing our candidate experiences, but the real gold is underneath these when you get into the actual survey data. So again, now we're looking at candidate for department CNPS over time. So as a manager, I've got a quick view of, are we getting better or are we getting worse? As we implement new programs and make changes, is that helping our candidate experience? At this level, now you want to start looking at brand affinity, and you should be asking throughout your hiring process, what do you think of our company as an employer? Variations of that question, you should be asking that in best case scenario, you should be asking that at the career site. Is job seekers are experiencing your brand? You should be asking that after application, after phone screen, et cetera, on down the line. Because you want to be able to see, like, are we fulfilling that brand promise as we're interacting with candidates? Because again, we talked about recruiters being frontline people that are touching candidates. Same with hiring managers. How is that translating into our employer brand? So for this example, now as a manager, you get a quick view of your team's impact on employer brand. And then by the same token, you want to see how well your team is interfacing with the business side of things, hiring managers. So you get the ratings for each team member from hiring managers. Again, same approach. You're looking for anomalies, you're looking for successes, digging in, finding out more. And as I said before, sort of overall comments, great for everybody to see those, to keep them in touch with candidates and what they're thinking and feeling. So what are the benefits there? Kevin talked about, you get a year-round view of recruiter performance. It's not something that you're doing, once or twice a year, and it becomes the basis for regular performance management discussions. So, day in and day out, you're reacting and seeing what's happening and having conversations about how can we perform better. You create an environment of continuous improvement. If something happens in real time, you see a comment or you're looking into something and you say, hey, we need to change this right now. You're able to take proactive steps, especially if you're gathering real-time feedback, which is kind of the model here. And you can correct issues that might get in the way of hiring a great candidate. And as I said before, you're finding out what's happening in terms of satisfaction and why. So it makes those conversations much easier to have, those performance management conversations, because you're not saying, hey, I'm getting this sense, or I'm accusing you of doing this, or, I think you're great because, we happen to be friends. No, you're reacting to data and you're saying, hey, here's what candidates are saying and here's what I'm seeing. What can we do about that? And again, the most common practice here is your TA manager is going to take the successes, the kudos that they see, and they're going to make those public. Right? Whether it's in team meetings, in Slack channels, et cetera. And if there's issues that need to be discussed or potential problems, you're going to have those closed door meetings. And then here's how do you get those metrics? Here's the questions, and those will be available to you.
All right, great. All right, Ian. So let's move on then into this TA director kind of head of TA conversation, right? And I think one of the things here is important is here now we're the leader of a team, maybe a group of directors or over different business units or different geographies. So Kevin, this is my question for you. If we could maybe dig in here. In the last bullet, we talk about this idea of high performing TA teams, ensure their teams are focused on outcomes, the hires, as well as the activities to get there. I think the audience would love to hear a little bit about what are some of those activities.
So I think the activities are everything that their recruiting teams are doing again. And I think at this level, Bill, to your last point, this is most likely where there's going to be multiple individuals and or business units reporting up to on the director level head. And they need to understand what are the activities that are from sourcing candidates to the initial vetting at the application stage, screening and interviewing. What are the activities that are driving the most qualified candidates that we are making offers to ultimately at the end of the day? And what does that trail look like? And how can we then maximize the success we're having? And if we run into roadblocks, if we're struggling to fill certain recs in certain regions, we're struggling to close candidates, maybe we're getting a lot more declined offers, we have to be able to better understand the why of that, so that we can then help our teams make those improvements to improve those pipelines and that candidate journey flow that I need to have that vantage point up. So it's all those activities that is driving ultimately those finalists that we're going to be making those offers to. How are we getting them there? What is generating the most successful candidates and closing rate, and why not otherwise?
Yep. One exciting piece that I've seen here in this space has been a little bit of this kind of ad hoc survey where, we are asking candidates who are being who are being asked questions as silver medalists if they're interested in applying
Yep.
to new positions, right? And we want to know from them, is the communication you're getting from our organization, is it effective? Is it causing you to click the reapply button? And we know from a data standpoint that answer, but yet we want to know anecdotally what is some of the data telling us, and and are the messages effective, and what do they recommend? And I think there's an opportunity then to use that data to make some change, to make some additional changes that otherwise might not have insight into. So I think it's pretty exciting, the kind of the ad hoc survey as well in this space.
No, I completely agree with that. It's again, the thing that it's, I don't know, maybe disheartening is not the right word, but it's close, is that we're always excited when we get companies participating in the Candy Benchmark research, but it is an annual program, right? It is a snapshot year after year. The reality is that getting one snapshot and then walking away and then never doing any surveying again for years, that's a kind of a disservice, I think, to the TA organization, because there's so much you don't know. You can assume a lot. I mean, most of the time, I think companies, there's a level of awareness that they should have internally already about how they're delivering recruiting and hiring and how it's being received, not just from candidates, but with their hiring managers. They should know some of that. But to not capture that data on a regular basis to then inform them on making improvements that's going to eventually help them grow and sustain their business, which is what we're getting to, where the big folks want to see, that's important to note. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Ian, pass to you.
All right, so let's talk about the TA director, TA ops analyst metrics. And I put it that way because this is the level at which a lot of the strategic and operational analysis is done. And this is the level where you're digging into the data and you're really trying to figure, okay, as a group, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well across a number of different dimensions? So I'm going to try and open up my slides here so I can see this a little bit better. And that's not happening. So, all right, so I'm going to go from memory because this is really small on my screen. But from a TA director situation, again, in a complex organization, a TA director is going to have a division of recruiting, whether that's a global unit, whether that's a business unit, whatever your meaningful divisions are, that's what in this model a TA director is going to be focused on. So you have an overall, what's the quick satisfaction score for this division? And then what is the satisfaction score for this division over time? Again, you're looking for things getting better, getting worse, anomalies, etc. At this level, if you've got some key initiatives or sub-processes within recruiting, in this case, I'm calling out internal mobility, like what are our internal candidates' experiences? You want to start to surface KPIs in this area. If that's important to your overall recruiting strategy. That could be military hiring, it could be college recruiting, it could be a number of different ones. But now you're starting to segment, okay, let's get more granular at this level. You're going to want to see what the satisfaction level is for each one of the teams that is within your division. So these are the scores from the TA managers for their teams. And you're doing the same kind of analysis and the same kind of monitoring that TA managers are doing for their individual teams, but you're dealing with your direct reports and their indirect reports. At this level, you're gonna, it's good to have a little bit more sophistication in your metrics, maybe some more predictive metrics. So what I've put here is a simple mapping of your recruiting journey. So you can see at the very bottom, you can see each stage of the recruiting process and what the satisfaction is at that stage. So you can see what's my satisfaction at application, what's my satisfaction at phone screen, and on down the line. You're looking for anomalies there that, if you've got a drop in satisfaction after an interview, after your interview stage, well, that's something that needs to be looked into. Again, more predictively, you can take all that data and just above that widget at the bottom, you can take all that data and put it into a 4-box Eisenhower box and basically map each stage of your recruiting process by which stages are contributing the most to our satisfaction and which stages are detracting the most from our satisfaction. And then you 4-box map those, and it gives you a quick prioritization of what's really working for us and what do we need to keep an eye on? What do we need to learn a little bit more about? At this stage, you start to bring in brand affinity by stage. And for the same reasons as you want to understand what your satisfaction is at each stage, you want to understand what that brand affinity is if you're asking that question, which you should be. In this case, you can see a 10-point drop if you go from the these phone screen stage to the interview stage. So that's something that should be looked into. I mean, it could be everything from, is it the state of our facilities? Is it, maybe our interviewing technology if we're doing a lot of electronic interviews? Could be hiring manager performance. But again, the gold here is the survey data behind there. And as you drill in, you're going to find out it specifically, where that's happening, where it's most happening, where the least satisfied ratings are coming in. That could be by job family, it could be by source, it could be by location. And you're going to see all the candidate comments. They're going to tell you, here's what's happening, here's what we're complaining about, et cetera. And at this stage also, it's kind of important is just in the same way you want to spotlight some of your key initiatives with process, a la internal processes, military process, recruiting processes. You made a lot of investment in technology, and that's a big topic these days. You should be asking questions after each stage where technology is involved. You should be asking a question about that technology and what was the experience of that technology provided. Easy example of that is after the application. You should be asking about how that application process went from a technological standpoint. You might get feedback of, why are you asking me about WOTC at my application? Do I have to qualify for WOTC? Is that going to be a gating factor? It can give you data that can help you optimize these technologies and see where they're providing good experiences versus where they're detracting and maybe getting in the way of your hiring. Other examples of that would be, assessment technologies, after scheduling, interviewing technologies that you're using. You can now roll those up into an index, and you can see very quickly, like, where are we in terms of what kind of experiences our technology is providing. And again, the data behind that is where the real gold is. Again, this is just a signpost to monitor your metrics and make managing great candidate experiences a year-round thing throughout the organization. And again, now we have let's surface the comments, latest comments, and I've just sort of segmented those by general comments and one of our key initiatives, which is internal candidates. So what are the benefits there? Obviously, as you saw, you get an integrated year-round view of team or division performance across a number of different dimensions, important dimensions. You're tying satisfaction data to strengths and weaknesses within your processes, within your people, and within your technologies. Becomes the same way as with team managers. It becomes the basis of discussions with your key reports. And if you dig into that data and you find actionable feedback, something you can take action on, and you should take action on either strategically or operationally, you've already got the data to back up any initiatives or investments that you want to make, whether that's an investment in money or in time. We've gotten a couple questions that I saw that I just want to address here. The first one was talking about bias. Like, if this model is really saying we are gathering feedback from all candidates. I mentioned sort of hiring bias if you're just measuring new hires. The question is, well, is there a bias to negative because you're interviewing or you're surveying all these rejected candidates? And what we find is, well, there's a number of different answers to that, but within the model of gathering continuous feedback at key hiring stages, you're getting feedback from candidates while they're still engaged, right? You're getting feedback on the application process as I'm filling out an application. I'm excited about a job. I want to help you out as much as I can because I want that job. So whatever you ask me, I'm going to give you honest answers about it. You're getting feedback at the phone screen stage. Okay, this is a much lower number of people. But again, you're getting feedback from engaged people, and you're able to look at that feedback by stage. So to the extent that you do a survey at disposition, where you're getting all your rejected candidates after they've been rejected. Two schools of thought of that. That's going to balance out some of the feedback that you've gotten before while candidates were engaged, right? Going to bring it back down to earth a little bit because there's a positive skew for people that are really just wanting to do whatever it takes to, get that job. So they're going to give you positive feedback. So there's a balance effect there. But it's also, look, you need negative feedback. That's where the gold is. You want that feedback that is as critical as possible. And you can discard, you can certainly, if you have it segmented, which you should, as you can see from these metrics, it's very possible to do. You can look at rejected candidate feedback separately from everything else and really understand that. And you can make your own judgment about what's actionable and what's not. But the gold is really in that rejected candidate feedback. Any comments on that, Kev?
Yeah, I completely agree. And that I tell organizations every year, there's always two skews you're going to see. You're going to see a positive skew for the people who get hired, and you're going to see a negative skew for the people who aren't. Because you could still deliver the best candidate experience in the world. And when you tell somebody no, there's going to be a negative reaction. But the key thing is, did they feel it was positive and fair? And the data will be able to tell you that. That's what's key. And are they willing to engage your business and your brand again? Going back to the business impact that we talked about at the beginning. That's what you need to understand. And the sheer volume of people you're saying no to. That's why I've always kind of said in the past, we're in the business of no in recruiting. We say no to a lot more people than we say yes to. And you've got to understand what that experience is and how it impacts your business and your brand. So.
All right. So, and there's another question here, and we got some more to get through here. So I want to kind of at this point kind of accelerate things. But there's a question about, what kind of actionable data do you see out of this? When you're getting this feedback, what kind of actionable items are surfaced? And the examples brought up of, what can you do with the recruiter made good use of my time on a 1 to 5 scale? And again, it goes back to, I can give you examples of things, recruiter didn't make good use of my time. You see that's happening within a particular recruiter's feedback, and you dig into that and you find out, well, the recruiter's continually not turning on their camera in a video interview. That's a sign of disrespect for candidates, and candidates are saying it. So that's coming in and they didn't make good use of my time. Sometimes it's they're showing up late. Sometimes they didn't show up at all. So that's kind of an easy one, but across the board, the actionable insights are just myriad. We have clients that discover whole recruiting teams. A big one is you discover that people aren't dispositioning candidates properly, right? You find out that you're not getting any feedback from certain recruiters, and they're just moving through people through the process and ticking the box on their numbers. And you find out, well, we've got some performance problems we got to deal with. You find out my internal candidates are much less satisfied than my external candidate. You find out, whoa, hey, that new job discovery platform that we put in, they hate it. And they don't want to do it the way you're trying to get them to do it. They just want to get to the jobs. So there's a lot of things that you discover along the way. But we're kind of low on time, and I want to get through the rest of the metrics that we have.
Sure.
So here's the questions to get to those TA director metrics. Head of TA metrics are very much like TA director metrics, but at this level, it's really more informational. You're not doing the analytics. You're just really wanting to see, hey, what is our satisfaction over time? These numbers look good to me. Do they not? Are there dips? Are we going down? Are we going up? Hey, why is this happening? Talk to your key managers, key directors. Again, if you've got meaningful divisions within your recruiting organization, this example shows, hey, recruiting for departments. How are we executing on candidate experience within these really important departments? And if you're really reliant on sales this quarter and you see that there's negative candidate experience in sales, well, you want to ask about that. Again, an overview of the candidate journey on the bottom. Are there any parts of our process that might look like they're not locked in? Brand affinity. I can't overstate how starved most people are for any brand affinity data. You do your employer brand work with an agency or internally, and you make some assumptions, and you do a survey, and you come up with your employer brand, and you go out and you execute against it. And then you might not ever look at it again. You might not be surveying, how it's going for a long time. So this continuous read on that's very important. We could spend a whole webinar on how important employer brand is to your cost of hire and your ability to attract candidates, et cetera. Again, you're looking at that tech satisfaction. It's really a way to see how are we on track. When I talk to my key managers, how are things going? Do I have discussion points? Again, I see the prioritized process issues by execution with the Eisenhower box there. One of the things that's really important about all this is when you have your metrics dialed in like this on candidate experience, be prepared that other organizations and leadership start pointing to talent acquisition and saying, hey, ops, hey, IT, you should see what TA is doing with their metrics and the experiences they're delivering. They know how to do metrics, because that's what we hear from clients all the time, is that once they start reporting this up, it makes them so much more visible in the organization. Leadership appreciates data. And it really raises the profile. So don't think that this is not germane data as you go up the chain. And again, this could be reported quarterly, biannually. It could be reported. It could be exposed in a dashboard that's always available. It's really up to you, and that could be done with a PowerPoint slide. It could be done in other ways, or it could be in an exposed dashboard, depending on what your capabilities are, et cetera. But always good to expose this data. And everybody now is reading off the same page, right? So data that you're reporting up, we know what kind of data you've got, and we know what to expect, and we know what's important to you. So what are the benefits there? Again, you've got an integrated view of performance across all those dimensions. If the head of TA has reporting capabilities or reporting needs, it's a basis for upward reporting. You see a quick view of organizational performance, and any strategic initiatives can be called out in this data, and you can keep track of things that are important that this year, this quarter, et cetera. Things like technology, things like internal recruiting, et cetera. It's a great way to keep everybody up to date. Now, hiring managers. Let's talk about hiring managers, guys. Some people love them, some people hate them in their interview process and the recruiting process. What do you guys think?
Exactly. And I think up to this point, right, we've talked a lot about the candidate. We've talked a lot about the TA team, the recruiter, and the recruiting leadership team, right, and the different levels of those. Mm-hmm. And now as we begin to dive into the hiring manager, right, Kevin, I'd love to hear your perspective. What matters most when we're talking about measuring hiring manager effectiveness, right? What are some of the key things that we're seeing when we get into this topic?
When you get to the interview stage and hiring managers are more involved in evaluating and reviewing candidates and interviewing them, this is a really critical stage, right? Because sometimes there are those recruiting cultures where the recruiter isn't really part of the interview at that point, and only the hiring manager is. And you really need to understand what that hiring manager feedback is and how they're impacting that candidate journey at that stage. And are they the reason why you're getting declined offers, which is a very potential possibility. And you need to understand what that is, and whether the hiring manager is hiring on a regular clip for their business units, et cetera, or they do it less frequently or once or twice a year, which sometimes can be even the more difficult folks to deal with. You've got to understand how they are impacting, and the candidate journey. They need to understand how they're impacting the candidates that they're interviewing, and they need to know how it impacts the business ultimately at the end of the day, and why this data is important for them to see not only the candidate experience feedback itself, but feedback about their performance as a hiring manager and how they impacted the candidates that they're screening and interviewing. So it's a critical business imperative that they understand what that impact is, period.
Yeah. Yep. Love that response. In the interest of time, I'll pass it to Ian, who I'm sure wants to go through a couple of metrics here.
Gotta hustle. Okay. So for the hiring manager, it's very simple. It's very similar to recruiters. You want to keep it very basic. what is the candidate NPS? Is that something good or is that bad? You want to see that performance over time. You want to also, this is not a common practice, but it's not unheard of, where you have a reciprocal feedback where not only is the recruiter giving feedback on the hiring manager at the end of a rec, but the hiring manager is, or vice versa, but the recruiter is now giving feedback to the hiring manager, just in the same way that the hiring manager is giving feedback to the recruiter. So you get an overall NPS for that, and you see that performance over time. When you talk about the benefits there, now you're really making hiring managers accountable. When you start showing hiring managers feedback data about what's going on in those interviews, first thing is you snap to attention. I'm being measured. Got to take these things seriously. You're showing them feedback that says, here's what the kind of experiences you're delivering and what candidates are saying. Again, the most common practice here is this is not typically not all the data is not typically just made available to hiring managers. This is something that's managed in TA. TA monitors this, and when they find things that should be acted upon, they talk to the hiring managers about it, either directly or through the department. But it's a great way to sort of expose them to feedback, provide additional training. A lot of times the problem is, hey, I'm not getting what I need from TA, and that's affecting my interviewing ability.
Mm-hmm.
So it really surfaces those issues and allows you to kind of optimize that part. As Kevin said, this is one of the most important parts to not only your ability to hire, but your candidate experience. And again, same way, they get more empathy for the candidate, right?
And some hiring managers recruit more than others, right? And sometimes it's a good reminder on the things you forget because you haven't recruited in 3 months as a hiring manager.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. And just and here's the questions here for hiring manager. Before we get into executive, we got a few minutes left. I just want to answer the question here that's up here. It's what recommendations you have for recruiters who are actively trying to provide the best candidate experience, but executive leadership makes decisions that negatively impact candidate experience, and they don't want to implement changes to make improvements. I mean, the best thing I can tell you about that is either you're in a no-win situation and it's never going to work, but if it is going to work, it's going to be driven by data. And if you're gathering this data, you can present this to any leadership and say, here's quantitative and qualitative data that says what we're doing is not working and it's negatively impacting us. We need to do something. And here's what we need to do because my candidates are telling me what we need to do.
Yeah.
And if they don't act on that, then you're like, there's other jobs out there, I guess. You're probably not in a great situation. So here we go, guys. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, executives want to see things in a summary fashion, right? We know they're making decisions in the aggregate. I think one thing, Kevin, that really jumps out at me here is the ability for an executive team, to evaluate their investments that they're making, and then use this feedback mechanism to evaluate those investments. What is there anything you would call out here in this space that you're seeing?
So, but the dot that connects to that is also, again, understanding what the business impact is of their recruiting and hiring and candidate experience over time. And one of the indicators that we're looking at in our benchmark research every year, we call the resentment rate. This is the percentage of candidates who say, I will never do anything with you, the employer, again. I had a really horrible experience. I'm done. And that is one indicator that we want companies to watch and manage and understand, because it impacts that, because literally the candidates are saying, I will never apply again, refer others. I won't buy stuff. If I'm a potential consumer, I won't be a brand advocate. And that data and the why of that data is what business executives and leadership need to see. They need to understand, no matter how painful that might be. And I can tell you right now, the resentment's the highest we've ever seen in our candidate experience research and data, and the highest right now, which should not surprise anybody, technology professionals have the highest. Technology candidates have the highest resentment. Anyway, bottom line, you need to understand the why of that, and leadership needs to understand the why of that. So
great. And we're up against it, guys, but the handout is available to you, but sort of CEO metrics, really the thing here is getting everybody reading off the same page. You can see what the metrics are, but if I'm CHRO and I'm overseeing talent acquisition, I get a good sense of how we're executing in key business units. It becomes how we're executing again over time in terms of candidate experience. I'm able to have discussions with key leadership within my organization. And again, it's surfacing those metrics throughout the organization so they know what you're doing and they're on board with it. And again, you get that employer brand data, which is super important the higher you go up the chain. CEO metrics. If you're in an organization where where your ability to hire a lot of people and have them in the right place at the right time is key to your organization, or if you getting very, very qualified people in the right seats is key to your mission, then your CEO is very, very interested in how well you're executing against candidate experience. And again, just basic high-level metrics, keeping a CEO informed of the most important things. What's our satisfaction? What's our brand affinity? How is our tech performing for us? And how are those trends happening over time? So it's all there in the download if you guys want to. I hope we've worked out the whole download situation. But Kevin, I'll let you wrap it up.
Thank you, Ian. And Bill, I remember your name, Bill. Wow. We're just having so much fun today with the technology, but hopefully you got out of it what we were hoping to convey to you all about the benefits and the I would even argue urgency of measuring your candidate experience, especially where we've been the past 4 years and where we continue to go. So I want to thank Surveil very, very much for sponsoring this webinar and being a big part of this webinar and all the data that they shared. And you can reach out to them if you have questions about Surveil on the platform. And I just want to thank everybody again for attending.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.